Welcome, and thank you for joining me for this gentle retelling of one of the most enduring and moving myths from the ancient world. Tonight, we will step back in time, into the quiet echoes of Greek mythology, and trace the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. It is a story of love and loss, of music and memory, and of the fragile line between hope and despair. For centuries, poets, philosophers, and dreamers have turned to this tale not only for its tragic beauty, but also for the questions it stays in our own hearts. As you listen, allow yourself to rest. Let the rhythm of the words carry you at a slower pace, one that invites stillness, reflection, and perhaps even sleep. The story of Orpheus and Eurydice is not a quick one. It unfolds like a soft melody, lingering on moments of beauty, pausing at shadows, and moving gently toward its conclusion. In the world of myth, time does not pass in the same way that it does in ours. A single glance, a single note of music, can change the course of eternity. Tonight, you will hear this myth as it might have been told long ago, by the firesides of ancient Greece or beneath the stars in a hushed gathering, where listeners let themselves be carried away by words. There is something deeply human in the desire to tell stories before sleep. Long before books and screens, before cities rose and spread across the land, communities shared their histories and myths through spoken tales. These stories were not only entertainment. They were ways of making sense of the world, of explaining why love can be so powerful and why loss can feel so unendurable. They were ways of teaching patience, courage, and humility. And in their telling, they created a sense of togetherness, binding listeners to one another through shared memory. You are part of that same tradition now, as you listen quietly, letting words replace the clutter of daily life. The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice is both tender and sorrowful. It is not an easy story, though it is told with beauty. Some myths from Greece are filled with battles and rivalries, but this one rests on the quiet strength of love and the fragility of trust. Orpheus, the greatest musician of the ancient world, possessed a gift so powerful that even stones and rivers seemed to bend to his melodies. Eurydice, his beloved, became the heart around which his music revolved. Their bond was one of joy, but also of sorrow, for fate intervened, and their love was tested in a way that has captured imaginations for centuries. As we begin, it may help to let your breathing slow, as if matching the gentle rhythm of the tale. Inhale softly and release any tension from your day. As you do, imagine the quiet landscapes of Greece, the warm air of summer evenings, the rustle of olive branches, and the distant sound of waves brushing against the shore. Picture the mountains fading into dusk, the marble columns of temples catching the last golden light, and the stars appearing one by one in a darkening sky. This is the world in which Orpheus' song first rose, and in which Eurydice's fate was sealed. The story we will explore together is not only about the past. Myths live because they speak to something timeless. They remind us of the sweetness of love, the bitterness of loss, and the choices we face when we are torn between doubt and trust. When Orpheus chooses to look back, when he cannot resist the pull of uncertainty, we recognize a part of ourselves. His struggle is our struggle, the desire for certainty when faith would have been enough. That is why the myth continues to be told, centuries after the first words were spoken about him. This journey will take us through many places. We will begin with the lives of Orpheus and Eurydice, who they were, and how they came to love one another. We will then move through the tragedy of Eurydice's untimely death, and Orpheus' descent into the shadowy underworld in search of her. We will walk beside him as he pleads with the rulers of the dead, and follow him as he climbs back toward the living world, Eurydice walking silently behind him. We will feel the suspense of that final moment, the glance that sealed their fate, and the grief that followed. Finally, we will reflect on what their story means, not only to the ancient Greeks but to all who hear it, even today. The pace will be gentle. Nothing will rush. Each part of the tale will unfold as if carried by a slow river, winding and deliberate, steady enough to let your thoughts drift. If you choose to fall asleep while listening, the story will wait for you. That is the nature of myths. They are patient, eternal, always ready to be heard again. As you settle into this story, Allow yourself to release the noise of the day behind you. The concerns, the plans, the worries, they can wait until morning. Tonight, there's only the quiet sound of a myth being retold, word by word, note by note, like the music of Orpheus himself. And just as his song once stilled the hearts of all who heard it, let this story become a gentle melody for you, easing you into calmness, into silence, into rest. And so, we begin, not with tragedy but with stillness, with the timeless world of ancient Greece. In that world, Orpheus is waiting to be heard, Eurydice is waiting to be remembered, and their story is waiting to unfold. A tale of music and love, of longing and loss, whispered to you tonight as softly as a lullaby. To truly understand the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, we must first take a slow step into the wider world that surrounded them, the world of ancient Greece. Imagine, if you will, a land of mountains and valleys, of endless seas and hidden groves, where myths and daily life were woven together as tightly as threads on a loom. The Greece of long ago was not only a place of bustling cities like Athens or Thebes, but also a landscape of quiet villages, of shepherds guiding their flocks, of fishermen casting their nets at dawn, and of poets reciting verses as twilight fell. It was a world alive with both human striving and divine presence. The people of Greece lived close to nature. The boundaries between the human and the divine were not as sharply drawn as they are in our modern understanding. The gods were thought to walk among mortals, unseen but felt. They were expressed through storms, harvests, and sudden turns of fate. Each grove of trees, each flowing spring, each mountain path might be sacred, connected to a story, a spirit, or God. And in this sacred world, myths like the tale of Orpheus and Eurydice were not distant legends. They were part of how people explained why the world felt as it did, why joy could be fleeting, why love could endure beyond death, and why music seemed able to stir the deepest parts of the soul. Close your eyes for a moment and picture the Greek countryside. Fields of golden grain swaying in the wind. Olive trees bending gently, their leaves flashing silver in the sunlight. Vineyards stretching across the hills, heavy with grapes that promised wine for festivals and quiet evenings alike. The sound of goats' bells echoing softly in the distance, and the rhythm of waves breaking along rocky shores. Life here was simple, yet it carried a richness born from connection to the land and the stories told upon it. It is within this landscape that Orpheus was said to play his music, music so pure and full that even stones seemed to lean closer to listen. At the heart of Greek culture was the act of storytelling. Long before myths were written down, they were spoken aloud, memorized and performed. A village might gather at night to hear a bard recite the deeds of heroes, the struggles of gods, or the tender tragedies of lovers. The words carried not only entertainment, but also lessons, warnings, and comfort. Myths were, in many ways, a way of dreaming together. They allowed listeners to step into other worlds, to face fears safely, and to imagine beauty beyond their own lives. For the Greeks, myth was not something separate from reality. It was a reflection of it, a mirror that revealed truths too deep for simple explanation. The religious life of the Greeks also shaped the way myths were told. Temples stood as the earthly homes of the gods, built from marble that gleamed in the sunlight and housed statues carved with exquisite care. Festivals were held in honor of deities, with music, dancing, sacrifices, and competitions. The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice would have been remembered in these contexts, perhaps whispered as part of larger ceremonies about life and death, about marriage and mourning. It was not just a story about two people, but a story that touched on sacred themes. Love strong enough to face the underworld, music powerful enough to move gods, and the fragility of human trust. When we think of Greece today, it is often through the lens of ruins, broken columns standing against the sky, silent amphitheaters where crowds once gathered. But for those who lived at the time, these places were alive and full of sound. The amphitheaters echoed with song and spoken word. The temples hummed with prayers. Marketplaces rang with the clamor of voices and the rhythm of daily trade. And woven into all of this was the steady presence of myth. Each person grew up surrounded by stories, of Zeus casting thunderbolts, of Athena guiding heroes, of Demeter mourning her daughter Persephone, and of Orpheus daring to step into the darkness in search of love. It is important to remember, too, that Greek myths often held contrasts. They contained both joy and sorrow, triumph and defeat. Just as the land of Greece could be both fertile and harsh, its myths reflected the balance of life itself. The story of Orpheus and Eurydice is filled with contrasts: music against silence, love against separation, hope against despair. This was how the Greeks understood the world, not as a place of simple answers, but as a tapestry of light and shadow. As you imagine this world, allow yourself to feel its rhythm. Picture the gentle life of shepherds in the hills, the laughter of children in village streets, the hushed reverence of worshippers at the temple steps. Picture also the endless stars above, the same stars that guided sailors and inspired poets. In those stars, myths were written, constellations shaped into stories that spanned across the night sky. Perhaps Orpheus himself once gazed upward, his lyre in hand, and thought of how fleeting human life was compared to the eternal heavens. Perhaps Eurydice once walked among the vineyards and fields, her presence as natural and fleeting as the wind. And so, the world of ancient Greece was not merely the backdrop for their tale, but part of its essence. The land, the people, the gods, the rituals, and the stories were all interwoven. Orpheus and Eurydice did not exist in isolation. They belonged to this larger, living mythological fabric. To understand their love and their loss is to glimpse the heart of Greek imagination itself. As we move forward, keep this world in your mind. Let the echoes of its mountains and seas accompany you. The Greece of long ago is not gone. It lives in these stories, in the quiet cadence of myths retold. In that world, we are ready to meet Orpheus, the poet, the musician, the lover whose song would become immortal. To understand the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, we must first pause to know Orpheus himself, the figure at its center, whose music and love shaped the course of the myth. Orpheus was unlike any other mortal of his time. He was born into a world that bridged the human and the divine, a child of extraordinary lineage and a destiny that would make him remembered long after his life had ended. His mother was Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, the one who inspired poets and storytellers to sing of heroes and gods. Some accounts say that his father was Apollo, the radiant god of the sun, prophecy, and music. Others claim that his father was a Thracian king, a noble mortal ruler. In either telling, Orpheus inherited gifts that made him stand apart, a voice that seemed touched by the divine, and a soul that carried both human longing and immortal inspiration. Imagine him as a young boy, growing up in the hills of Thrace, surrounded by the natural world. Perhaps he sat by rivers, listening to their steady currents, or walked through forests where birds sang in chorus. From an early age, it was said that Orpheus could mimic the sounds of nature and then transform them into melodies that were entirely his own. The lyre, a stringed instrument gifted to him, some say by Apollo himself, became his constant companion. With it, he could draw forth sounds so beautiful that even the most restless heart would quiet, and even the wildest creature would pause to listen. His gift was not mere entertainment. It was something deeper, almost magical. Ancient writers told that when Orpheus played, trees leaned closer, rivers stilled their flow, and stones themselves seemed to soften. Birds gathered, animals lay at his feet, and the winds carried his music across fields and mountains. In a world where music was already considered sacred, Orpheus' art was beyond human measure. It was as though the very harmony of the cosmos flowed through his hands and his voice, allowing mortals a glimpse of the divine order that underpinned the universe. But Orpheus was not only a musician. He was also a poet, a dreamer, and a traveler. His songs told stories of gods and heroes, of battles and journeys, of sorrows and triumphs. In a culture where spoken word was the lifeblood of memory, Orpheus' ability to sing and shape stories made him a figure of reverence. His presence was said to bring calm to kings and courage to warriors. Even the famed heroes of Greece recognized his greatness. In some accounts, Orpheus joined Jason and the Argonauts on their quest for the Golden Fleece. His music, it is said, guided the ship through dangers that no sword could conquer. When the voices of the sirens threatened to lure sailors to their deaths, Orpheus strummed his lyre and sang more beautifully than they, drowning out their call and saving his companions. His power was not one of violence, but of harmony, persuasion, and peace. It is worth reflecting on what made Orpheus so different from other heroes of myth. Many Greek tales celebrate warriors who fought with strength, cunning, or divine weapons. Orpheus, however, was a hero of gentleness. His strength lay not in force, but in art. He showed that beauty and music could achieve what swords and armies could not. In this way, he stood apart as a reminder that power can take many forms. He embodied a truth that listeners even today can feel, that music, poetry, and love can touch us in ways nothing else can. As you listen, imagine Orpheus seated beneath a tree, his lyre resting against his knee. He plucks the strings one by one, and a melody drifts into the evening air. Birds fall silent to listen. The leaves themselves seem to tremble, as though they, too, are moved. The villagers nearby pause in their tasks, leaning closer to the sound, their worries forgotten for a moment. This was a world Orpheus created wherever he went, a world of calm, of beauty, of stillness. Yet for all his gifts, Orpheus was still mortal. He felt joy, longing, and sorrow. His music, though divine in its effect, sprang from a human heart. Perhaps that is why it carried such power. He knew what it was to desire, to hope, to grieve. His songs did not belong only to the gods. They belonged to humanity as well. They expressed the very things that words alone could not capture: the tenderness of love, the ache of loss, the courage to face the unknown. Because of his extraordinary gift, Orpheus became both admired and envied. Kings welcomed him, poets revered him, and even gods lent their ears to his song. But with admiration came responsibility. For in the Greek world, every extraordinary gift carried a shadow, a reminder that mortals who stood too close to the divine often faced trials as great as their talents. Orpheus, blessed with a voice that moved the cosmos, would one day face a grief that even his music could not undo. For now, however, picture him at the height of his youth, the son of a muse, a child of music and poetry. He is calm yet radiant, with a presence that seems to soften the world around him. When he sang, listeners felt that the fabric of life itself was being woven anew, each note a thread in a vast, invisible tapestry. His life was destined to be extraordinary, not for battles fought, but for the ways his heart and his song would reach into realms no mortal had dared to tread. And so, when the story of Orpheus and Eurydice begins, we already know that he is no ordinary man. He is a figure whose music binds the living world to the divine. He is a bridge between mortals and gods, between life and death, between love and eternity. His story could only ever be one of great beauty and great sorrow. And it is in that tension, between his power and his fragility, that we begin to glimpse the shape of the myth that will unfold. If Orpheus is remembered as the great musician whose songs could bend the world itself, then Eurydice is remembered as the heart around which his music revolved. She is the stillness at the center of his melody, the beloved figure whose presence defined his joy and whose loss shaped his sorrow. And yet, compared to Orpheus, the ancient texts say far less about Eurydice. She is a figure wrapped in quietness, more often described by the shadow she left than by the details of her life. This silence, however, is not emptiness. It allows her to become something more, a symbol of beauty, of fragility, and of the fleeting nature of happiness. The Greeks often described Eurydice as a nymph, one of the graceful spirits of nature who lived in forests, rivers, and meadows. Nymphs were not gods, but they were not wholly mortal either. They embodied the living essence of the natural world, where a tree grew, or a spring flowed, or a meadow bloomed. There the spirit of a nymph was believed to dwell. Eurydice is often imagined as one of these beings, her presence bound to the quiet loveliness of the earth. To think of her is to imagine soft green grass beneath the feet, the rustle of leaves on a warm day, or the glimmer of sunlight dancing on a river's surface. She belonged to the language of nature itself, and her story reminds us that even the most delicate forms of beauty can be lost in an instant. In some accounts, Eurydice is not described as a nymph, but simply as a woman of great beauty. Whether mortal or semi-divine, her presence captured Orpheus' heart completely. It is said that when he first laid eyes on her, his music changed. Before her, his songs were powerful, awe-inspiring, able to command nature and silence storms. After her, his music became tender, filled with warmth and devotion. Eurydice inspired him in ways that no audience, no god, and no hero ever had. She transformed his gift into something more intimate, more human. His music was no longer only about the harmony of the universe, but about love itself. We are not told much about Eurydice's thoughts, her dreams, or her voice. In Greek myth, women often appear through the eyes of others, as objects of devotion, of rivalry, of tragedy. And yet, the very absence of detail gives Eurydice a quiet power. She is not remembered because of grand deeds or bold speeches. She is remembered because of the way Orpheus loved her, and because of how her loss reshaped his life. In this sense, she becomes a reflection of something deeply familiar to us all, the way a single person, sometimes in silence, can become the center of our world. Her story, though brief, is filled with symbolism. As a nymph of nature, she represents life's fleeting joys. Just as flowers bloom for a season and then fade, Eurydice's time with Orpheus was short but radiant. Her death, sudden and cruel, was not only the loss of a beloved wife but the loss of beauty itself, the reminder that happiness can vanish as quickly as it arrives. This fragility is part of what makes her story so haunting. She embodies the truth that joy is never guaranteed, that love is precious precisely because it is vulnerable. Imagine her walking through a sunlit meadow on the day of her marriage, her steps light, her face serene, the music of Orpheus surrounding her like a gentle breeze. Perhaps she paused to gather flowers, her hands brushing against tall grasses. Perhaps she laughed, her voice carrying softly across the field. The image is fleeting, but that is the nature of Eurydice. She passes quickly through the story, like a shadow at dusk, leaving behind an absence that can never fully be filled. For Orpheus, she was not just a companion. She was the anchor of his soul. The love they shared is described as one of deep union, a bond so strong that even death could not sever it completely. It is said that after she was taken from him, his music turned into mourning, every note a lament, every song a cry of longing. Through Eurydice, we see not only the power of love but the pain of its absence. Her story becomes the mirror through which Orpheus' grief is reflected and magnified. In the telling of myths, Eurydice often does not speak. She is quiet when she walks behind Orpheus in the underworld. She is quiet when she disappears a second time, pulled back into the shadows after he looks back at her. This silence has led many to see her as a passive figure, but in truth, her silence may be more powerful than words. It is the stillness that holds the weight of loss. It is the quiet absence that makes Orpheus' music resonate so deeply. Sometimes silence speaks louder than voices, and Eurydice's silence is one of those moments. In later retellings, poets and artists sought to give her more presence. Some imagined her as a voice of tenderness, calling softly to Orpheus as they ascended from the underworld. Others gave her words of forgiveness, accepting her fate with grace. Still others portrayed her as a figure of longing herself, desiring life, love, and light just as deeply as Orpheus longed to bring her back. In each version, though, her role remains the same. She is the soul who inspired Orpheus' greatest act of love, and whose loss gave his story its enduring sorrow. To think of Eurydice is to think of beauty that is fragile, of joy that is fleeting, and of love that lingers even in absence. She is the soft figure in the story, yet her presence is what gives the myth its weight. Without her, Orpheus' music would have been powerful, yes, but it would not have carried the ache of longing that makes it timeless. Without her, his descent into the underworld would never have taken place. Without her, the myth would lose its heart. And so, as we prepare to move into the next part of the tale, the meeting of Orpheus and Eurydice, their love and their marriage. We hold her image close, a figure of grace, walking softly through the meadows of Greece, the embodiment of life's fragile beauty, destined to inspire one of the greatest stories of love ever told. The story of Orpheus and Eurydice truly begins with their meeting, the moment when two lives touched and became forever bound together. Though the myths do not tell us exactly how they first saw one another, we can imagine the scene slowly, as though we are walking through it ourselves. Orpheus, already known across the land for his music, would often sit beneath the open sky and let his lyres sing. Perhaps Eurydice first heard him in such a moment, her steps carrying her closer, drawn by a sound unlike any other. The music would have floated through the air like a living thing, threading itself between trees and flowers, falling softly upon her ears until it reached the quietest corners of her heart. We might imagine her stopping, listening from a distance at first, before stepping into view. Orpheus, looking up from his instrument, would see her there, framed by the light, her face calm yet filled with wonder. If ever there was a moment when music and silence met in perfect balance, it was he. He played not for kings, nor gods, nor even the vastness of nature, but for the woman whose presence stirred something new in him. For Orpheus, Eurydice became the reason behind every note he ever played from that day onward. Their love blossomed like a gentle song, unhurried, unfolding in its own rhythm. Orpheus would play, and Eurydice would listen, her presence making his melodies sweeter, his words more tender. The joy they shared did not need grand gestures or declarations. It lived in the small things, in the way she leaned closer as he sang, in the way he looked at her with quiet devotion, in the ease of their companionship. The Greeks often spoke of love as a powerful force that could lift mortals into greatness or plunge them into despair. For Orpheus and Eurydice, it was both, a gift that filled their days with beauty, and a bond that would one day test the very limits of fate. Their wedding, when it came, was said to be a day of joy and celebration. Picture a meadow alive with flowers, the air sweet with the scent of blooming vines and the warmth of the sun spilling across the fields. Nymphs and spirits of nature would have gathered, celebrating the union of one of their own with the greatest musician of the age. Orpheus' lyres sang brighter than ever, filling the air with harmonies that seemed to bless the day itself. Every leaf, every bird, every ripple of the wind seemed to join in chorus, as though nature itself rejoiced at their love. Eurydice walked through this world like a vision of serenity, her hand in Orpheus' hand, her steps light as though she floated rather than walked. It is said that the gods themselves took notice. Apollo, the god of music and perhaps Orpheus' father, must have smiled upon the union. The Muses, Orpheus' divine family, would have blessed it as well, seeing in Eurydice the one who gave his songs their true heart. For a moment in time, all seemed aligned. A mortal and a nymph joined in love, their lives bound together, the world itself echoing their joy. But Greek myths often remind us that joy is fragile, that happiness, however sweet, is never promised to last. The very beauty of this wedding day is heightened because we know, as the storytellers of old knew, that tragedy was waiting just beyond it. The brightness of their union casts a sharper shadow on the sorrow that will follow. And yet, for now, we linger here, in their love's beginning, savoring it as they must have savored each other's presence. Think of their evenings together, Orpheus playing softly as dusk fell, the last light of the sun fading into stars. Eurydice's head resting on his shoulder, her eyes closed, listening to the way his melodies rose and fell, weaving peace into the night. These moments, though simple, were the essence of their happiness. Love, in its purest form, is often quiet. It is not the thunder of storms or the clamor of battles, but the stillness of two souls who have found one another. In Orpheus and Eurydice's story, it is these quiet moments that carry the greatest weight. For Eurydice, Orpheus' music must have felt like a blessing. To live surrounded by such beauty, to hear melodies shaped by devotion and longing, must have filled her heart with a serenity few others could know. And for Orpheus, Eurydice's presence was his true inspiration. His lyre had sung before, but with her, it sang of love. She was a muse behind the muse's sun, the heartbeat beneath every note. In many ways, their meeting and marriage symbolized the union of art and nature. Orpheus, the artist, whose gift came from divine inspiration, and Eurydice, the nymph, whose essence was rooted in the earth itself, became one. Together, they reflected the Greek belief that harmony is found when art and nature are not separate, but joined. Their love was itself a kind of music, a duet, fragile and beautiful, carried on the wind. The ancients did not record long speeches or detailed conversations between them. Instead, they left us with the image of their bond, Orpheus singing, Eurydice listening, the two of them walking side by side through meadows and groves. This simplicity is part of the myth's power. We do not need long accounts to understand their love. We feel it in the weight of Orpheus' grief when she is gone. We see it in the daring of his descent into the underworld. We hear it in the timeless echo of his music. And so, in this part of the story, we linger in their happiness. We hold on to it, knowing how soon it will be taken away. The meeting of Orpheus and Eurydice is not only a beginning but also a reminder that love, however radiant, is always vulnerable to fate. But for now, the meadow is still, the lyre is bright, and their hands are joined. Their love is new, unbroken, and alive, a song at its first note, carrying us into the heart of the tale. The joy of Orpheus and Eurydice's union, so pure and radiant, was destined to be brief. Ancient storytellers remind us that happiness in myth is often shadowed by sorrow, but the brightest flame can cast the deepest shadow. Their love had only just begun to blossom when fate reached out its hand, altering the course of their lives forever. The day that would change everything began, as many tragedies do, with simple, unassuming beauty. Eurydice wandered through a meadow, the grass soft beneath her steps, wildflowers bowing gently in the breeze. She moved as though she belonged to this landscape, her presence blending seamlessly with the natural world. For a nymph such as she, the flowers, the streams, and the trees were not mere surroundings but companions, bound to her by the threads of nature itself. The air was warm, perhaps filled with the hum of bees and the rustling of leaves, the kind of day when the world feels timeless, untouched by grief. But it was on this quiet, sunlit day that Eurydice encountered danger in its most unexpected form. Some versions of the myth say she was pursued by Aristeus, a shepherd or minor god who desired her beauty. As she fled from his advances, her feet carried her swiftly through the grass, fear and urgency breaking the gentle rhythm of a walk. Others tell us only that she wandered into a grove, stepping lightly among the flowers. Whatever the cause, the result was the same. She tread upon a hidden serpent, coiled in the grass, waiting unseen. The snake struck swiftly, its fangs piercing her skin, delivering venom that coursed through her veins. Imagine for a moment the silence that must have followed, the meadow still, the birds pausing mid-song, as though nature itself held its breath. Eurydice fell, the life draining from her as quickly as the color fade from a sunset. Her eyes, once filled with light, closed as the shadow of death claimed her. For the nymph who was so closely tied to the rhythms of nature, it was nature itself, in the form of a serpent, that took her life away. The myths do not linger long on her final breaths, but we can. We can imagine her thoughts turning to Orpheus, the man whose music had filled her days with wonder. Perhaps she remembered the sound of his lyre, the warmth of his voice, the way his presence steadied her heart. Her last moments may have been filled with sorrow for leaving him so soon, for the wedding garlands still fresh in their memory, for the love that had scarcely begun before it was torn apart. News of her death must have reached Orpheus quickly, though we are not told how. Perhaps a companion of Eurydice came running, breathless and grief-stricken, or perhaps it was one of the woodland nymphs who mourned with him. However it came, the blow was sudden and devastating. Orpheus, whose music could tame wild beasts and soften the hearts of gods, found himself unable to ease the pain in his own soul. His lyre, once an instrument of joy, now became the voice of his sorrow. He played, and his grief poured out into every note. The trees leaned closer to listen, the rivers stilled, the animals of the forest gathered in silent mourning. It was said that even the stones wept at the sound of his lament. There is something deeply human in this image, the artist who turns to his craft not for praise, not for beauty, but to give shape to unbearable grief. For Orpheus, music was the only way to hold Eurydice's memory near, the only way to speak when words were too small for the immensity of his loss. Yet no song, no matter how divine, could bring her back. The space beside him remained empty, the warmth of her presence gone. Their home, their meadow, their walks together, all became shadows of what they had once been. For a man who had touched the heavens with his melodies, this was the deepest descent into despair. It is important to pause here, to feel the stillness of this moment. The death of Eurydice was not just a passing sorrow. It was the turning point of the entire tale. The myth is not merely about love and loss, but about what one will do when faced with that loss. And for Orpheus, grief was not the end, but the beginning of an unthinkable journey. His mourning would drive him to attempt what no mortal had dared before, to enter the land of the dead and call her back. But before that, there was silence. Days, perhaps weeks, when his music was nothing but lament, when his hands trembled on the strings, when his voice faltered beneath the weight of sorrow. Imagine him wandering alone, the world around him unchanged but emptied of meaning. The sun still rose, the rivers still flowed, the flowers still bloomed, but for Orpheus, all beauty was muted. Without Eurydice, every joy was incomplete, every melody broken. And so the myth tells us that grief can reshape even the strongest of souls. Orpheus, who had once played with the confidence of one favored by the gods, now played with the desperation of a man broken. This is the contrast at the heart of the story. Love, radiant and new, suddenly extinguished. Joy, pure and unshaken, transformed into mourning. The ancients may not have spoken in long detail about his days of grief, but the power of the story lies in what is left unsaid. We are invited to imagine it ourselves, the sleepless nights, the aching heart, the ceaseless replaying of memories. Anyone who has loved and lost can hear in Orpheus' silence the echo of their own sorrow. His story becomes ours, not because we descend to the underworld, but because we, too, know what it is to long for someone who is gone. And so, with Eurydice's death, the tale moves from the brightness of love into the darkness of loss. This is not the end of her presence in the story, but the beginning of her role as the one who dwells beyond, the one Orpheus must fight to see again. Her absence becomes a presence of its own, guiding his steps, shaping his choices, and drawing him toward the path that will lead into shadow. The meadow, once filled with music, is now silent. The wedding, once so full of promise, is now only memory. And Orpheus, who had everything, now has nothing but his grief. In that emptiness, the story pauses, preparing for the journey to come. Orpheus' sorrow was unlike any other. His love had been so radiant, so full of promise, that to lose it so quickly was unbearable. Eurydice's absence was not just the loss of a wife. It was the silencing of the very song of his soul. Every place he looked seemed to echo with her memory. The meadows where she once walked, the trees that had swayed to the sound of his music, even the stillness of the rivers, all reminded him of what he had lost. For Orpheus, the world did not feel empty in itself, but hollow, as though the essence of its beauty had been stripped away. He played his lyre, but the melodies that came forth were no longer songs of joy. They were laments, fragile and haunting, each note heavy with longing. His music had once drawn animals from the forest and stones to move, but now it drew sorrow from the very earth. Birds ceased their singing to listen, rivers slowed their flow, and the trees bent low in mourning. Some said that even the gods themselves heard his lament and wept. Orpheus had always been touched by divine favor, but now his gift became a vessel for grief rather than glory. Imagine him sitting in solitude, the lyre resting in his lap, his fingers brushing across the strings without thought, every sound a reflection of his broken heart. There is something deeply human in this picture, the artist who turns his pain into music, not to impress or to please, but because he cannot do otherwise. Music was his language, and in his grief, it became the only way to keep Eurydice alive within him. Every chord was a memory, every rhythm a whisper of her presence. But as the days turned to weeks, Orpheus came to realize that music alone could not sustain him. No matter how mournful, no melody could bring Eurydice back. Her absence was not eased by song. It was only magnified. In his solitude, he began to dwell on the unthinkable. What if he could see her again? What if he could bring her back, not in memory, not in song, but in truth? In Greek thought, the land of the dead was not a place to be lightly considered. It was a shadowed realm, separated from the world of the living by rivers and guarded by creatures of dread. Yet the more Orpheus considered it, the more determined he became. His love for Eurydice was not a love that could be confined to memory. It was not content to dwell only in the past. It called him to act, to reach across the boundary of life and death itself. The ancients would have seen this decision as extraordinary, for few mortals dared to challenge the laws of fate. Death was final. Once taken, it was not undone. Yet Orpheus was not like other mortals. His music had power not only over men and beasts, but over the hearts of gods themselves. If anyone could hope to move the rulers of the underworld, it was him. And so his grief transformed into resolve, a quiet but unshakable decision. He would go down into the underworld. He would find Eurydice, and he would bring her back. One can imagine the weight of this resolve. To decide to face Hades and Persephone, to stand before the gods of the dead and plead for what no mortal should ask, was no small thing. Yet grief gives courage, and love gives strength. Orpheus' heart, though shattered, held a flame that would not go out. His devotion to Eurydice burned brighter than his fear. In that devotion, he found a purpose greater than despair. There is a softness to this turning point, as though grief itself is transformed into action. He did not cast aside his sorrow. He carried it with him, every step, every note of his lyre. But sorrow no longer froze him in place. It became the current that carried him forward. To love Eurydice was to try, even if the attempt cost him everything. The myths suggest that this resolve was born from his music itself. In pouring out his grief through song, Orpheus had already touched the boundary between life and death. His laments were so deep, so moving, that the very air seemed filled with Eurydice's memory. Perhaps it was in those laments that the thought first formed. If music could soften the hearts of gods, could it not soften death itself? If stones and beasts and rivers could yield to his song, could not Hades and Persephone do the same? This was not arrogance but devotion. Orpheus did not seek to defy the gods for his own glory. He sought only to bring back the one he loved. His plan was not to storm the underworld with force, but to enter it with humility, armed only with the beauty of his lyre and the purity of his grief. That was his strength. Where others might have used violence or trickery, Orpheus trusted in the power of his art and the truth of his love. Before long, his decision became clear. He would journey to the very gates of the underworld. He would descend past the river that no living man should cross, past the guardian beasts, past the shades of the dead. He would play his lyre in the presence of Hades and Persephone, and he would ask for Eurydice to be returned. Few mortals had ever dared such a thing. Fewer still had returned to tell of it. But Orpheus' grief left him no other path. And so, with his lyre in hand, his heart heavy but resolute, he prepared to leave the world of the living. The journey he was about to take was not only a journey into death's domain, but also a reflection of the soul's deepest longing, the refusal to let love be silenced by loss. This resolve was the beating heart of the myth. It was what carried Orpheus forward, what would soon open the gates of the underworld to his song. In this moment, standing between despair and determination, Orpheus became more than a musician. He became a symbol of love's defiance, of art's power, of grief transformed into courage. His decision was made. The path was set, and the story was ready to move into its darkest, most wondrous chapter. The journey to the underworld was unlike any other path a mortal could take. For Orpheus, it began in silence, with only his lyre in hand and the memory of Eurydice in his heart. To descend into the land of the dead was not merely a physical journey, but a crossing into a place where the boundaries of life no longer held. It was a path feared by all, for once a soul entered, it rarely returned. Yet Orpheus, driven by love and grief, placed his trust in music, believing that the same songs which had softened beasts and charmed rivers might open even the gates of death. The first step was toward the edge of the world, to the places where mortals rarely walked. The ancients imagined the underworld as lying deep beneath the earth, far from sunlight, across rivers that divided the realms of the living and the dead. Orpheus walked steadily, each step heavy but certain, his melodies accompanying him as if to comfort his own fear. His music was not loud or triumphant, but gentle, almost like a prayer whispered into the silence. As he entered the threshold of shadow, the air grew colder, and the colors of the world dimmed. The flowers no longer bloomed, the grass no longer shimmered with green. Instead, he found himself in a barren land, quiet and gray, where the sky itself seemed to fade into mist. This was the border of the underworld, the space where few mortals dared to wander. Still, Orpheus pressed on, his lyre carrying notes that seemed to light the path ahead. Soon he came to the river Styx, the great boundary that separated the world of the living from the dead. Its waters were dark and still, filled with shadows that moved beneath the surface. On its banks waited Charon, the ferryman of souls, whose task was to carry the dead across the waters. Charon's presence was not one of malice but inevitability, a figure who had guided countless souls into the realm of Hades. He was accustomed to silence, to obedience, to the steady march of death. But now, for perhaps the first time, he faced a living man who stood before him not in fear, but in resolve. Orpheus lifted his lyre and began to play. The music was soft, rising like mist above the dark waters, curling into the air with a beauty that even death could not deny. Charon, who had carried countless shades without pause, felt the weight of the song settle upon him. The melody spoke of love, of grief, of the unbearable pain of separation. It told of a man who had lost everything and yet carried within him a devotion so deep it could not be silenced. The ferryman's hands, long accustomed to the steady pull of the oar, loosened in wonder. For the first time, he hesitated, and then, silently, he allowed Orpheus to step into his boat. The ferry drifted slowly across the Styx, the dark waters rippling beneath. Orpheus played still, his music filling the silence, steadying his own courage as much as it guided the boat forward. The shades of the dead watched from the banks, their hollow eyes turned toward the living man who dared to enter their world. They did not speak, for shades have no voices, but their presence added to the weight of the moment. Orpheus, mortal among the dead, was carried deeper into the realm of shadow. Beyond the river, more trials awaited. At the gates of Hades stood Cerberus, the monstrous hound with 3 heads, whose duty was to guard the realm against escape and intrusion alike. His growl was said to shake the very earth, his eyes burning with eternal vigilance. To most mortals, the sight of him would have brought terror and despair. But Orpheus did not draw a sword or raise a shield. Instead, he played. His fingers moved across the strings, and the notes fell like gentle rain upon the creature's ears. Cerberus, who knew only ferocity, found himself lulled by the song. His growl softened, his eyes drooped, and one by one his massive heads lowered to the ground. The music was not a command but a comfort, a melody that spoke to the beast as tenderly as it spoke to gods and mortals. Slowly, Cerberus lay still, subdued not by force but by beauty. And so Orpheus passed, stepping beyond the guardian into the heart of the underworld. The realm of Hades stretched before him, a vast expanse of shadows and silence, where countless souls wandered. These shades drifted aimlessly, without warmth, without color, only faint echoes of the lives they once lived. Yet as Orpheus walked among them, his music stirred something within their hollow forms. They gathered, listening, their empty faces lifted toward the sound. The melodies reminded them of life, of memory, of the emotions they had lost. In the stillness of death, Orpheus' music became a spark, briefly rekindling what had been extinguished. Deeper and deeper he went, the path winding through caverns and fields of shadow. Each step brought him closer to the throne of Hades and Persephone, rulers of this realm. And with each step, his song grew stronger, his courage steadier. Orpheus was still a mortal man, small against the vastness of death, but he carried within him a power that even death could not deny. This journey was not merely physical but symbolic. It was a journey of love into loss, of devotion into despair. Orpheus, carrying nothing but his music, proved that love could compel a mortal to walk where no mortal should. The underworld was a place of endings, yet he entered with the hope of a new beginning. His path was lit not by torches or stars, but by the unwavering flame of love itself. By the time Orpheus reached the inner halls where the throne of Hades and Persephone awaited, the entire underworld had heard his song. Shades paused, guardians yielded, the very silence of death gave way to melody. And in this moment, Orpheus stood ready, his lyre in hand, his heart filled with both sorrow and courage, prepared to plead for Eurydice in the presence of the rulers of the dead. At the heart of the underworld, past the river Styx, past the sleeping hound Cerberus, Orpheus finally entered the halls of Hades and Persephone. The throne room was a place of vast silence, where shadows gathered like clouds and the air seemed heavy with the weight of eternity. Here sat Hades, stern and solemn, his presence commanding, his eyes cold as stone. Beside him was Persephone, the queen of the dead, whose beauty carried both sorrow and quiet strength. Together they ruled over all who had departed from the world above, ensuring the balance between life and death remained unbroken. It was into this chamber that Orpheus, a lone mortal, walked with nothing but his lyre. No warrior's armor protected him, no weapon gleamed in his hands. His only defense, his only hope, was the music he carried in his heart. For a moment, silence pressed against him like a weight, the still air filled with the eyes of countless shades who lingered in watchful expectation. Orpheus bowed his head, not in fear but in reverence. He knew he was asking the impossible, that no mortal had the right to stand before Hades and demand the return of his soul. Yet he did not come with demands. He came with song. Slowly, he raised his lyre and let his fingers touch the strings. The sound was gentle at first, as if he were breathing life into the silence, coaxing sound into the still air of the underworld. His song rose, soft and sorrowful, each note flowing into the next like water over stone. The melody spoke not in words but in feeling, carrying his grief and his love into every corner of the hall. He played of Eurydice, of her laughter and her grace, of the joy she had brought him and the emptiness left in her absence. He played of their wedding day, bright with promise, cut short by fate's cruel hand. And as he played, he sang, his voice trembling but steady, filled with devotion that no darkness could silence. "Oh, hear me," his song seemed to say. "I do not ask to undo the laws of death, nor to claim what is not mine. I ask only for love. She was taken from me too soon, before her time, before the fullness of her life could bloom. If there is mercy in your hearts, if there is room for compassion in the realm of shadows, grant her to me, if only for the span of her days. Let me walk with her once more beneath the sun." The shades of the dead leaned closer, their silent forms stirred by the melody. They who had forgotten warmth now remembered it. They who had forgotten love felt it again. Even the rivers of the underworld seemed to pause, the still waters listening as his song filled the hall. The very stones of Hades' palace softened, weeping with the sound of his grief. Hades, who was not easily moved, sat in stillness, yet his stern gaze flickered. His throne, carved from shadow and silence, had never known such a sound. Persephone, queen of the dead, lowered her eyes, her heart touched by the depth of Orpheus' devotion. For she, too, knew what it was to be torn between two worlds, to love and yet be bound to shadow. She felt his longing as though it were her own. The music swelled, rising like a tide, filling the chamber with a beauty that seemed too pure for death to contain. Orpheus poured into it all that he was, his grief, his devotion, his refusal to let Eurydice fade into silence. His voice wove with the strings, carrying not only sorrow but hope, fragile and shining, like a light trembling in darkness. By the time his song ended, there was no silence left in the hall, only the echo of his love lingering in the air. Orpheus lowered his lyre, his eyes downcast, awaiting judgment. The underworld held its breath. Even the shades seemed to hover, waiting for the god's response. Hades, after a long silence, finally spoke. His voice was deep, carrying the weight of eternity, unshaken and slow. "Mortal," he said, "you have moved me. Your music has touched even this realm, where no warmth remains, where no joy endures. Your devotion is greater than most men's courage. You ask what no mortal should, yet your plea cannot be ignored." Persephone placed her hand lightly upon her husband's, her voice soft but resolute. "Let them be joined again, Hades. If only once more, if only for the time allotted to her, grant them this mercy. For his song has reminded even me of the warmth of love, and I cannot turn away." Hades considered, his dark eyes fixed upon Orpheus. At last, he gave his judgment. "She shall return to you. But there is a condition. You may lead her back into the world of the living, yet you must walk ahead of her. She will follow, and until you have both fully crossed into the realm of light, you may not look back. If you turn your gaze upon her before the journey is complete, she will be lost to you forever." These words fell heavy, yet they were also a gift, for no mortal before had been granted such a chance. Orpheus bowed his head in gratitude, his heart swelling with hope. He would see Eurydice again. He would walk with her once more beneath the open sky. But the condition, though simple, was perilous, for to resist looking back, to trust in her presence without proof, would test the very core of his devotion. And so, the judgment was given. The shades parted, and Orpheus prepared to lead Eurydice once more into the light of the living world. His song had triumphed. His love had been heard. But the trial was not yet over, for the hardest test still lay ahead. Orpheus stood in the shadowed hall of Hades, his lyre still resting lightly in his hands. And for the first time in what felt like endless days, he saw her. Eurydice, pale but radiant in the dim light of the underworld, stepped toward him. Her eyes, filled with both recognition and quiet sorrow, met his, and in that instant, the world felt whole again. It was a reunion neither had dared to imagine possible. Yet here they were, brought together by the sheer power of Orpheus' devotion and the music that had softened the hearts of gods themselves. But the reunion was fragile, delicate as the first rays of dawn upon a still meadow. Hades' condition hung over them like a shadow. Eurydice would follow him, unseen, step by step, and Orpheus must not turn his gaze until they had both crossed into the world of the living. One glance, one faltering doubt, and all would be lost. The weight of this condition pressed upon him, heavier than any river or beast, more dangerous than any mortal foe. Yet he knew there was no choice. His love demanded trust, patience, and restraint. He took her hand, careful and tentative, feeling the warmth of her touch through the chill of the underworld. She followed, her steps echoing softly behind him, a quiet presence that both comforted and terrified him. Every instinct screamed to look back, to ensure she was truly there, to see her face and know she was real. And yet, he could not. Every note of his earliest songs now seemed to whisper this single truth: patience, devotion, trust. His music had brought her to him. Now restraint would carry them back. The path was shadowed and uncertain. The ground beneath their feet was cold and uneven, the air thick with the echoes of those long departed. Orpheus moved carefully, his steps deliberate, guiding Eurydice without the aid of sight. Each moment demanded courage, the kind of courage that comes not from strength of arms but from the endurance of the heart. The underworld, which had been a place of despair, now became a test of love. Every shadow that shifted, every whisper from the dead, was a temptation to look back, to falter, to lose what he had gained. As they walked, Orpheus recalled every memory of Eurydice, every note of every song they had shared. He remembered the way she laughed, the softness of her hand in his, the joy in her eyes on the day of their wedding. These recollections strengthened him, becoming the tether that held his resolve. Music, which had guided him through the gates and past Cerberus, now became a shield against doubt. He hummed softly to himself, a melody of reassurance, a thread of courage spun into the silence of the underworld. Behind him, Eurydice moved with grace and quiet confidence. Though she could not see the path, she trusted him completely. Her love mirrored his own, a silent force that propelled them forward, step by careful step. In a way, she too was performing an act of faith, surrendering to the conditions imposed by the rulers of the underworld. Their journey, though fraught with danger, was also a testament to the depth of their devotion. Neither spoke, for words might break the fragile balance they maintained. Silence, accompanied by the quiet rhythm of footsteps and the faint echo of Orpheus' song, became their companion. The landscape around them was strange and unyielding, filled with shadows that seemed to reach out with unseen hands. The spirits of the departed watched silently, curious and restless. Some whispered to one another, drawn by the soft strain of Orpheus' music. Others drifted closer, sensing the intensity of a love that dared to defy the very finality of death. And yet, despite the presence of so many, Orpheus felt alone in the truest sense. For in this moment, only one outcome mattered, only one presence was essential, only one heart needed to be kept in step with his own. Minutes, or perhaps hours, passed in this careful procession. Each step was an act of faith, each heartbeat a reminder that the journey would fail if he yielded even briefly to doubt. The distance between life and death felt infinite, yet Orpheus moved steadily, guided by love, devotion, and the unspoken bond between himself and Eurydice. He imagined the light of the living world just beyond reach, a faint glow that promised warmth, air, and the return of everything that had been lost. And yet, the tension grew unbearable. The closer they came to the edge, the more vivid his desire to look back became. His heart raced, not from fatigue but from the urge to confirm her presence, to see her face, to know with certainty that she was following. Every step forward was an act of trust, and every step carried the weight of all he had suffered and all he had gained. Eurydice's presence was both a comfort and a temptation. One glance, and the fragile spell could be broken. Orpheus pressed on, steadying his breath, listening to the sound of her footsteps behind him, feeling her warmth, knowing she was there even without proof. The underworld, though filled with shadows and silence, was transformed by the force of their love. His music, though quiet now, resonated through the unseen walls, carrying the echo of their reunion and the promise of what awaited beyond the darkness. Finally, a faint light appeared ahead, the soft glow of the world above. The edge of the underworld, the place where shadow met sun, where death gave way to life, was within reach. Orpheus' heart swelled, not with triumph, but with cautious hope. Every step mattered, every heartbeat counted. Eurydice followed faithfully, and for the first time, the promise of return seemed almost tangible. Yet the journey was not yet complete. The test of patience, trust, and love still demanded one final act of restraint. In this quiet, tense passage, the myth teaches us something profound. Love is as much about trust as it is about desire, and devotion is measured not only in grand gestures but in the restraint to preserve what is most precious. Orpheus and Eurydice moved forward together, step by careful step, carrying the weight of hope and the burden of uncertainty, each moment a fragile note in the music of life and love. The light of the living world grew brighter with each careful step. Orpheus could feel it on his skin, a soft warmth that spoke of air, sun, and the life beyond the underworld's shadow. Eurydice followed, her presence constant yet unseen, a quiet rhythm behind his own. Every moment was delicate, every heartbeat a measure of hope and tension. Orpheus had almost reached the edge, almost completed the journey that would return them to one another, when a sudden fear gripped his heart. It was the weight of uncertainty, the human impulse to seek confirmation, that now tested him. All those days and nights of grief, the long descent through shadow, the careful crossing of rivers, the passage past guardians and spirits, it all led to this final stretch. Orpheus had been told plainly, "Do not look back." To glance even once before leaving the underworld would doom them both. And yet, the mind of a man in love, filled with longing and doubt, struggles against the simple command of reason. He imagined Eurydice faltering, slipping in the darkness, her hand brushing against nothing, her steps unsteady. He imagined a shadow ahead of him where her form should have been. His heart, weighted by both fear and devotion, screamed for confirmation, for proof that she was truly there. The lyre, which had guided him so far, seemed distant now, silent in his hands as all his attention focused on the fragile thread connecting him to Eurydice. Step by step, the edge of the underworld drew nearer. Orpheus' mind wavered between trust and terror. He remembered her laughter, her warmth, the very essence of who she was. Could he endure to step into the sunlight without seeing her, to move forward without one glance to confirm her presence? Love and doubt, so intertwined, became a storm within him. He had conquered rivers, beasts, and gods, but could he conquer the simplest, most human impulse, the need to look? And then it happened. A single step too far, a heartbeat too long, and Orpheus, unable to resist the longing that burned in his chest, turned. His eyes, seeking her face, betrayed the fragile covenant that had been entrusted to him. In that instant, Eurydice was there, a living presence within reach, and yet she was gone. The myth tells us that she did not speak, that she did not cry, that the shadow of her departure was silent, yet it was absolute. One glance, and the life he had fought so tirelessly to reclaim slipped away like mist through his fingers. The warmth, the heartbeat, the promise of reunion, all vanished in the cold light of consequence. Orpheus reached out, but there was nothing to grasp. The path behind him seemed to ripple and fade, a threshold closing forever. Eurydice was pulled back into the shadows from which she had been freed, returned to the realm of death. His heart, which had carried her through rivers and past monsters, now carried only the echo of absence. The grief of before, profound as it had been, seemed pale compared to this new, piercing sorrow, the sorrow of hope lost at the very moment it was within reach. The underworld, which had once yielded to his music, now seemed implacable. The spirits watched, silent witnesses to the tragedy, while the guardians and shadows remained unmoved, as if acknowledging that the laws of fate were absolute. Orpheus' music rose again, but this time it was not a song to move gods or beasts, not a plea for mercy, but a lament that poured from the soul in its rawest form. His grief was transformed into something eternal, a sound that the underworld itself could not ignore, though it could not undo the loss. In the hush of that moment, the story speaks to something deeply human. Even the greatest of heroes, armed with courage, devotion, and talent, can be undone by the simplest of impulses. Orpheus' glance, a moment of doubt and longing, illustrates that love is not only measured by acts of bravery but also by restraint, patience, and trust. It is a reminder that even when one possesses the power to defy the impossible, the human heart remains fallible, tender, and vulnerable. Eurydice's second departure was final. No plea, no song, no sorrow could restore her to him this time. She was returned to the shadowed halls, unseen and unreachable. Orpheus remained in the underworld, the echoes of his lament filling the silent corridors. His grief, though private, became timeless. It was said that the shades themselves paused to listen, that rivers slowed, and the stones seemed to weep at the sorrow of a mortal who had dared to challenge death for love, only to have it snatched away at the final step. Orpheus' return to the world of the living was quiet, marked not by triumph but by the weight of loss. He had faced the underworld, played for gods, and almost reclaimed what was most precious to him. Yet he emerged alone, carrying Eurydice only in memory and in the unbroken devotion of his heart. The sunlight of the world above was now touched by the shadow of grief, a light that reminded him of what had been and what would never be again. And so, the myth teaches us about the delicate balance of love, trust, and human imperfection. Orpheus' glance, so brief and so human, changed everything. It was a moment of weakness, yet it was also a testament to the depth of his feeling. He loved so profoundly that the impulse to confirm that love became irresistible. His failure was not one of courage, nor of devotion, nor of skill, but of a human heart's fragility, a reminder that even the greatest souls are still bound by emotion. The tragedy of this glance resonates through the ages because it is familiar to all. We long, we hope, we reach for what we love. And sometimes, even in the very instant that fulfillment seems possible, our own hearts betray us. Orpheus' story endures because it is both extraordinary and human. It is the tale of a hero, a lover, a musician, and above all, a man whose devotion transcended life and death but could not escape the tender imperfections that make us human.
Orpheus emerged from the underworld into the soft light of the living world, but the sun felt different now. Its warmth, once comforting, seemed to touch him with a bittersweet reminder of what he had lost. The world had remained unchanged in its beauty. The wind whispered through the trees, the rivers sparkled beneath the sky, and the flowers bloomed as they always had. Yet for Orpheus, everything was different. The colors seemed muted, the air thinner, the music of life a distant echo. Eurydice was gone, and with her departure, the joy of the world had dimmed. He walked slowly, his lyre slung across his shoulder, each step heavy with grief. The journey back had been long, but the hardest path was not through rivers or shadows, it was the path of loneliness. He had faced monsters and gods, crossed boundaries of life and death, and yet he had returned without her. The world, once vibrant with love, now seemed to whisper only of absence. Each familiar place, every meadow and grove where they had walked together, was now a reminder of her absence. Orpheus' music, once a source of solace for both himself and others, now became a vessel for sorrow. His fingers moved across the strings, drawing from them soft, haunting melodies that carried his grief into the air. The notes were not joyous or triumphant. They were gentle, mournful, a lullaby for the pain that filled his heart. Birds paused to listen, rivers slowed their flow, and even the stones seemed to tremble under the weight of his lament. The music was no longer a bridge to others, but a mirror of his own soul, reflecting the emptiness he now carried. In this solitude, Orpheus wandered through the landscapes of memory. He recalled Eurydice's laughter, the light in her eyes, the warmth of her hand in his. Each memory was vivid, yet it deepened the ache of her absence. The sweetness of what they had shared now mingled with the sharp edge of loss. Every meadow, every grove, every path they had walked together became a sacred place, touched by love and shadowed by grief. He carried these memories as one carries a fragile treasure, knowing that they were all that remained of the life he had almost reclaimed. The villagers, if any noticed him, would have seen a man changed. His eyes, once bright with hope and music, now held the depth of loss. His voice, though gentle when he spoke, trembled with a sorrow that words could not fully express. Orpheus had returned, yet he was no longer entirely of the living world. Part of him remained in the shadows of the underworld, where Eurydice had been pulled back into darkness. He was a man caught between two worlds, bound forever to the memory of what he had loved and lost. Even in this grief, Orpheus did not abandon his music. It became his companion, his way of keeping Eurydice alive in memory and spirit. Every song he played was imbued with longing, with the echo of her laughter and the touch of her hand. His melodies spoke to those who would listen, carrying with them a gentle sadness that could soothe and comfort, even as it reminded all who heard it of the fragility of life and love. His music became a living memorial, a way to transform pain into beauty, sorrow into something tangible and enduring. The myth tells us that Orpheus never again sought the company of other women. His heart remained with Eurydice, steadfast even in her absence. He wandered the lands, singing to the trees, the rivers, and anyone who would listen, his songs filled with the memory of the love that death had taken but could not erase. It was a devotion so complete that it transcended time, a love that survived beyond the mortal span of life, reaching into the eternal realm of story and song. In these quiet moments, we see something universal in Orpheus' grief, the realization that loss is not merely about absence, but about the transformation of everything that remains. The world continues, as it always does, yet for those who have loved and lost, the world carries a new weight. Every joy is tinged with memory, every sound colored by what is missing. Orpheus' life, though outwardly unchanged, had shifted in its center. Eurydice's absence defined the rhythm of his days and the melody of his music. And yet, there was a strange serenity in his sorrow. Though he was broken by the loss, there was purpose in his lament. Each note, each song, became a bridge between what had been and what could still be remembered. His grief, profound as it was, had a kind of beauty, a quiet, reflective beauty that spoke of enduring love and devotion. It was not anger nor despair that consumed him entirely, but the gentle, persistent ache of longing, softened by the act of remembrance through music. The tale of Orpheus' return reminds us that life and death, joy and sorrow, love and loss, are intricately woven. He walked through the world of the living with a heart divided, carrying both the light of memory and the shadow of grief. Eurydice was gone, but she lived on in the music he played, in the melodies that whispered through the air like the echo of a dream. Orpheus' songs became timeless, not only because of their beauty, but because of the depth of feeling they carried, a feeling that any who listen can recognize, the love that refuses to fade, even when life itself moves on. In this way, Orpheus' story continues even after his return. He is a reminder that even in solitude, even in loss, love can endure. It can shape the world around us, transform sorrow into something eternal, and carry the memory of those we have lost into the hearts of those who follow. The underworld may have reclaimed Eurydice, but Orpheus kept her alive in every note he played, in every shadow he walked, and in every heart touched by his music. Life after loss transformed Orpheus in ways that few could truly comprehend. The world above, once bright and familiar, now carried an echo of absence in every breeze, every shadow, every whisper of the rivers. The beauty that had once filled his days felt incomplete, like a song missing its final note. Yet, in this altered reality, Orpheus found a new kind of purpose, not in reclaiming what was lost, but in honoring it. His grief, profound as it was, became a bridge between worlds, the living and the departed, joy and sorrow, memory and reality. Everywhere he went, Orpheus carried the weight of his experience with quiet dignity. He walked the forests, wandered through the meadows, and lingered by the rivers where he and Eurydice had once walked together. Each place reminded him of her presence, though she was no longer there in flesh. The earth, the wind, the streams, all seemed to echo the absence of her laughter, her footsteps, her voice. And yet, within that echo, he found inspiration. He discovered that grief could be a source of art, that sorrow could shape beauty, that memory could preserve what life had taken. Orpheus' music changed as he changed. No longer were his songs only joyous or celebratory. They became contemplative, tinged with melancholy yet rich with emotion. His lyres sang of love and loss, hope and despair, the fleeting nature of life, and the eternal presence of memory. People who heard him play were moved, even if they did not know the story behind each note. His melodies carried the universal language of human experience, longing, devotion, sorrow, and the fragile beauty of love that had been taken too soon. It is said that animals, too, responded differently to his music. Where once they had gathered in playful curiosity, now they lingered in solemn attention, as if understanding that Orpheus' songs were not merely sounds, but messages from the heart, infused with the weight of loss and the depth of feeling that only someone who had truly loved and lost could convey. Even the wind seemed to pause when he played, carrying his music over rivers and valleys, allowing the world to share in his grief. Orpheus' days became a meditation on memory. He walked slowly, often alone, reflecting on the moments he had shared with Eurydice. He remembered her smiles, the soft touch of her hand, the warmth in her eyes. These memories, though painful, were precious. They were the fragments of a life too briefly lived and too swiftly taken. Through them, he kept her alive, not just in his mind but in his soul. Each song, each melody, was a gift to her memory, a way to preserve her presence in a world that no longer held her. Yet, even amidst his sorrow, there was a quiet serenity. Orpheus had faced the underworld, confronted death, and almost reclaimed what had been lost. He had journeyed farther than any mortal dared and had returned, though alone. There was a strange strength in this survival, a recognition that grief, though heavy and relentless, could also teach resilience, patience, and the enduring power of love. The pain he carried was immense, but it became a lens through which he saw the beauty in the world anew, the gentle sway of the trees, the ripple of sunlight on a stream, the tender whisper of the wind through the meadows. Orpheus' music became a source of comfort not only for himself but for others. Travelers, villagers, and wanderers who heard him play found solace in his melodies. His songs, though born of sorrow, offered a sense of connection and understanding that transcended words. They spoke of the universality of loss, of the human capacity for love and devotion, and of the quiet courage it takes to endure when life seems unbearably unfair. In sharing his grief through music, Orpheus created a space where others could feel understood, comforted, and even inspired. Over time, the myth tells us, Orpheus' reputation grew. He became known as the greatest musician of his age, not because of triumph or conquest, but because of the depth of emotion he conveyed through his art. His lyre, once a tool of joy and charm, had become a vessel of memory and longing. Each song was a testament to Eurydice's life, a reflection of his love, and a reminder that beauty could coexist with sorrow. His music endured because it carried with it the truth of human experience, the fragile, aching, enduring power of love and loss. And yet, Orpheus remained solitary. The world moved around him. Life continued in its cycles of joy and sorrow, birth and death, but he walked through it with a quiet separation, carrying a private sorrow that few could touch or understand. Eurydice lived in his memory, in his music, and in the small rituals he performed each day to honor her. Though she was gone, the love they had shared transformed him, shaping the way he moved through life, the melodies he played, and the way he saw the world. The enduring lesson of Orpheus' life after loss is that grief is not a force that destroys entirely, but a force that can transform, deepen, and illuminate. He teaches us that even when the heart is broken, there is a way to create, to share, to preserve what is most precious. Through his music, Orpheus showed that loss could be a bridge between the living and the memory of those who have gone, a channel for beauty that persists even in sorrow. As he wandered the forests and meadows, his lyre in hand, his heart full of memory, Orpheus embodied the quiet truth of enduring love. His story reminds us that grief, though heavy and painful, can be a source of reflection, art, and connection. Each note he played carried Eurydice with him, a whisper of life amidst the permanence of loss. Though he walked alone, he was never truly without her, for memory, music, and love had become inseparable parts of his being. The power of Orpheus' music grew even stronger after his return from the underworld. No longer was it merely a source of entertainment or charm. It became a vessel of memory, sorrow, and subtle wonder, a bridge between the worlds of the living and the departed. Wherever he walked, his lyre seemed to carry a life of its own, resonating with the emotions he could no longer fully express in words. His grief had been transformed into a force that touched everything around him, a quiet magic that could soothe hearts, calm minds, and awaken long-forgotten memories. Imagine him moving through the forests, the wind rustling gently through the trees as if in anticipation of his melody. Birds paused in mid-flight, listening, their wings folding as they absorbed the sorrowful beauty of his song. Streams, which had rushed past unnoticed, slowed their currents, reflecting the sky in tranquil, unbroken surfaces. Even the stones, silent and immovable, seemed to hum in resonance with the music, as though the vibrations of Orpheus' lyre reached into their very core. Nature itself seemed to recognize the depth of his grief, responding with a gentle harmony that matched his heart's rhythm. Villagers and travelers who encountered Orpheus were likewise moved by the quiet intensity of his playing. He did not perform for applause or recognition. His music flowed naturally, effortlessly, like a river finding its way to the sea. Those who heard him felt a strange calm settle over their minds, a subtle lifting of anxiety or sorrow, as though the notes themselves carried away the heaviness of everyday concerns. Some wept quietly, touched by the beauty and sadness woven together in his melodies. Others simply sat and listened, lost in the delicate balance between sorrow and serenity. What made Orpheus' music so extraordinary was not only the skill of his hands but the authenticity of his heart. Each note was infused with the memory of Eurydice, the depth of his love, and the enduring ache of loss. In this way, his music became more than sound. It became a living reflection of his soul. It could console those who were troubled, calm those who were restless, and even stir a quiet reflection in those who had never known such profound love or loss themselves. His songs reminded listeners of the fragility and beauty of life, of the way that joy and sorrow often intermingle, and of the power of memory to preserve what has passed. The myth tells us that Orpheus' influence extended far beyond human hearts. Animals of the forests and field were drawn to his presence. Deer approached without fear, foxes paused to listen, and even the wildest of creatures seemed to recognize the gentle authority of his song. It was said that rivers could alter their course slightly, stones might shift their position, and even the winds seemed to carry his melodies across vast distances. Nature itself became a silent witness to the enduring power of his music, as if acknowledging that art born of love and grief could transcend boundaries, touch souls, and calm the world. Orpheus' music also carried an almost spiritual dimension. Pilgrims and travelers would come from far-off villages to hear him play, drawn not by fame but by whispers of the peace his melodies inspired. People who were anxious, grieving, or restless found that listening to Orpheus' lyre brought a sense of quiet acceptance. There was no need for words, no requirement of understanding. The music itself communicated what language could not. It carried the weight of sorrow, the warmth of love, and the quiet hope that even after loss, beauty and connection remained. In quiet moments, Orpheus would play alone, seated by a river or beneath a grove of trees, and the world would respond in subtle, miraculous ways. Leaves would tremble gently, sunlight would dapple through the branches, and the soft murmur of water would join the cadence of his song. Even the shadows seemed to bend in harmony with the music, creating a living tableau of sound and movement that existed only in that fleeting moment. The undercurrent of grief, far from being destructive, became a force that harmonized with life itself, a reminder that sorrow and beauty often walk hand in hand. Orpheus' music also became a form of storytelling. Each melody carried the narrative of his love and loss, the journey to the underworld, and the haunting tragedy of Eurydice's second departure. Those who listened felt as though they had glimpsed the shadowed halls of Hades, walked the river Styx, and stood beside the mortal man who dared to challenge death itself. Through his lyre, Orpheus shared not just sound, but experience, allowing others to connect with the deepest aspects of human emotion: courage, devotion, longing, and the inevitability of loss. And yet, for all its melancholy, Orpheus' music was never entirely sad. There was always a thread of hope, a glimmer of serenity that balanced the sorrow. It reminded listeners that while grief may shape us, it does not have to define us completely. It offered comfort, reflection, and a gentle passage through emotion, allowing the heart to process, remember, and ultimately accept. His melodies became a form of quiet meditation, a way to soothe both the listener and the musician himself, as he continued to carry the memory of Eurydice within him. Through his music, Orpheus became a living legend. His songs traveled through villages, forests, and fields, leaving behind a subtle, lasting influence. Nature, people, and even the memory of the departed were touched by his artistry. It was a power that arose not from might or magic, but from the purity of emotion and the sincerity of devotion. Orpheus' music, born of grief and love, transformed the world around him in ways both visible and invisible, leaving a legacy that would echo through time and story, long after he had passed from the earth. In this way, Orpheus' music embodies the enduring truth that sorrow and love, when expressed fully and sincerely, can create beauty that transcends the boundaries of life and death. It soothes, it teaches, and it endures, a gentle reminder of the fragility of existence and the quiet, transformative power of devotion, memory, and art. As time passed, Orpheus' life became one of quiet isolation, a reflection of the profound loss that had defined his journey. The sun rose and set over the lands he wandered, yet the days seemed different to him now, marked not by ordinary events but by the rhythms of memory and the melodies he played on his lyre. He no longer sought the company of others. His heart, irrevocably bound to Eurydice, could find solace only in the echoes of a memory and the music that kept her spirit alive. To many, he appeared a solitary figure, walking alone through forests, meadows, and hills, carrying both grief and beauty with him wherever he went. The solitude Orpheus embraced was not one of despair, but of reflection. In the quiet hours of morning and evening, he would sit beneath trees or near streams, letting the soft light of day filter through the branches, his lyre resting on his lap. His fingers would move gently across the strings, producing melodies that were both tender and mournful, songs that told of love lost yet enduring. Each note seemed to hang in the air, carrying with it the weight of his sorrow but also the warmth of memory. In this way, his music became a companion, a silent presence that filled the spaces left empty by Eurydice's absence. Orpheus' life, though marked by isolation, was deeply intertwined with the natural world. Animals, as they always had, responded to his presence and his music. Birds would gather around him, perching quietly on branches, their chirps subdued in reverence to the melodies he played. Deer and smaller creatures lingered nearby, listening in attentive stillness. Even the wind seemed to pause when he played, carrying the gentle resonance of his lyre across valleys and hills. Nature itself became both witness and participant in his life, a reflection of the harmony he sought to create between grief and beauty, sorrow and solace. His days were spent wandering, playing, and reflecting. He revisited places that had once been full of joy and shared laughter with Eurydice, now empty and silent, yet alive in memory. The meadows where they had walked hand in hand, the rivers where they had paused to rest, the groves where sunlight had danced upon leaves, all became sacred spaces, infused with memory and song. Orpheus did not attempt to replace the loss with companionship or distraction. Instead, he embraced the quiet, allowing the natural world and his music to sustain him. In this way, his isolation became a space of contemplation, a world where grief and love coexisted in delicate balance. Though he was alone, Orpheus' heart remained open to the power of his music. He played not only for himself but for anyone who happened upon him, and in doing so, he shared the depth of human emotion in its most honest form. Travelers, villagers, and wanderers who encountered him often reported feeling a profound sense of peace and reflection after hearing his melodies. The music carried grief, yes, but also a quiet beauty that resonated with the soul, soothing the listener as much as it comforted Orpheus himself. It was as if the lyre, infused with memory and love, had the power to heal not only through sound but through shared understanding. Orpheus' later life was also a period of deep reflection on mortality, fate, and the impermanence of human life. He had faced the underworld, confronted death, and yet returned to the world of the living alone. This experience had left an indelible mark on his heart and mind. He often pondered the nature of love and loss, the fragile balance between hope and despair, and the ways in which human emotion shapes the world around us. His music became a meditation on these truths, a gentle but persistent exploration of the eternal questions that accompany life and death. Despite the sorrow that defined much of his life, there was also a quiet dignity in Orpheus' existence. His devotion to Eurydice, unwavering even in her absence, reflected a love that transcended mortality. He did not seek to forget or replace her. Instead, he allowed his memory of her to guide his art, to shape his interactions with the world, and to inspire the beauty that flowed from his lyre. The myth tells us that his songs became timeless not because they were technically perfect, but because they were infused with a depth of emotion that could never be replicated. The raw honesty of his heart resonated in every note, and that resonance touched all who listened. Orpheus' isolation, far from being a punishment, became a crucible in which his music and character were refined. The quiet hours alone, surrounded by nature and memories, allowed him to transform grief into something lasting and profound. His songs became both an offering and a sanctuary, a place where sorrow could be expressed, shared, and ultimately transformed into beauty. Even in solitude, he was connected to the world through his art, to other hearts through shared emotion, and to Eurydice through memory and devotion. As the years passed, Orpheus continued to wonder, play, and reflect, never fully reintegrating into the life of others, yet never entirely cut off from the world. His legend grew, carried by the echoes of his music, the stories told by those who had heard him, and the quiet or inspired by his devotion. He became a symbol of the enduring power of love, the transformative nature of grief, and the beauty that arises when sorrow is expressed with honesty and care. In this way, Orpheus' later life exemplifies the delicate balance between solitude and connection, grief and creation, memory and presence. Though he lived apart from others, he remained deeply engaged with the world through his music and his reflection. His life teaches that even in the face of profound loss, one can find purpose, beauty, and quiet influence, touching the hearts of those around them in ways that transcend ordinary existence. Orpheus' life of quiet wandering and music, though filled with beauty and reflection, eventually drew the attention of those who could not understand the depth of his devotion or the solemnity of his art. Among them were the Maenads, followers of Dionysus, known for their wild dances and frenzied revelries. They moved through forests and hills in ecstatic abandon, attuned not to the tender melodies of the lyre, but to the chaos of instinct and desire. When they encountered Orpheus, they were unsettled by his calm, his solitude, and the power of his music, which seemed to command nature itself and the hearts of those who listened. The Maenads could not grasp the stillness that defined him, nor the quiet authority of grief that shaped his songs. To them, his music was a challenge, a reminder of restraint, devotion, and the subtler, quieter powers of love and sorrow. Orpheus' melodies, which could soothe and calm, appeared to contradict their untamed spirits, and they interpreted his presence as defiance or rejection. In their eyes, the serenity and depth of his song were incomprehensible, even threatening, for it reminded them of what they did not possess: control over their emotions, the ability to contain desire, and the capacity to love with patient devotion rather than with wild, fleeting passion. And so, on a fateful day in the forest where Orpheus wandered, the Maenads attacked. Their frenzy was sudden and violent, a storm of limbs, voices, and wild cries. Orpheus did not resist. He did not raise his voice in anger nor attempt to flee. His hands, which had created beauty from grief, remained poised over the lyre, though in the chaos of the moment he could not play. The attack was not born of reason but of misunderstanding, of impulses that could not be tempered by reflection or memory. It was swift, decisive, and tragic, leaving no room for negotiation or mercy. The myth recounts the violence with somber clarity. Orpheus was torn apart by the frenzied Maenads, his body broken by the force of their rage. Yet even in death, there was a strange reverence for the power of his life and music. His head and lyre, severed from his body, continued to carry his song. It is said that the wind and rivers bore his melodies far from the forest, that birds and animals paused to listen, and that travelers in distant lands could hear the gentle, mournful strains as though the earth itself had become a living instrument. Even in the absence of flesh, Orpheus' devotion, grief, and love persisted, echoing across the world with a quiet, haunting beauty. This tragic end, though violent and untimely, is not merely a story of death. It is a reflection on the enduring nature of art, love, and memory. Orpheus' music, born of sorrow and devotion, transcended the limitations of the mortal body. His melodies continued to soothe, inspire, and move those who heard them, a reminder that true art is inseparable from the heart that creates it. The power of his music outlasted his physical existence, reaching beyond the violence of the moment into eternity, carrying with it the memory of Eurydice and the enduring depth of his devotion. Even in this grim tale, there is a subtle comfort. The Maenads, driven by frenzy and misunderstanding, could not fully extinguish the essence of Orpheus. His art, infused with grief, love, and memory, proved stronger than their rage. It became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the ability of the heart to endure loss, and the capacity for beauty to survive even the harshest of circumstances. Orpheus' death, though tragic, underscored the truth that the creations born of deep emotion, music, memory, and love, can outlive the fleeting chaos of the world. After his death, the pieces of Orpheus' body were treated with reverence in some traditions. His head and lyre were said to float down rivers, carrying songs across the lands. Birds listened and sang in response, and people who heard the melodies recognized them as the voice of Orpheus, a voice that could no longer be silenced by death. Even in fragmentation, the story teaches us that true devotion and artistry remain whole in spirit, continuing to influence and touch others long after the artist has left the mortal plane. This section of the myth also serves as a cautionary tale about the fragility of genius and devotion in the face of misunderstanding and violence. Orpheus, a figure of extraordinary courage, patience, and love, fell victim not to the forces of nature, gods, or fate alone, but to the inability of others to comprehend the depth of his soul. It is a reminder that the world may not always honor devotion, and that profound beauty can sometimes provoke fear or resentment in those who cannot recognize it. Yet even in the narrative of his death, the myth encourages reflection rather than despair. The persistence of Orpheus' music demonstrates that loss, tragedy, and misunderstanding do not entirely erase the impact of a life lived with integrity and love. His melodies continued to ripple outward, touching hearts and spirits, teaching lessons of devotion, artistry, and the enduring power of love that persists beyond death. In this way, the story maintains its calming, contemplative tone, even as it recounts a tragic ending, reminding us that beauty and meaning are often most profound when they coexist with sorrow. Ultimately, Orpheus' death at the hands of the Maenads becomes a final testament to his life, an acknowledgement that while the mortal body is vulnerable, the spirit of art, love, and memory cannot be destroyed. His songs continued to resonate across rivers, forests, and valleys, reaching countless hearts and carrying with them the story of Eurydice, the trials of the underworld, and the enduring power of devotion. In this way, Orpheus' tragedy transforms into a quiet, eternal presence, a song that never truly ends, and a love that transcends mortality itself. Even in death, Orpheus' story did not end. The mortal world had claimed his body, but the spirit, infused with love, devotion, and the memory of Eurydice, transcended the boundaries of flesh and time. It is said that in the quiet stillness of the afterlife, Orpheus found a reunion that had been denied to him in life. The underworld, once a place of shadows and uncertainty, became a realm where the love that had defined his existence could finally exist without obstacle. In this eternal space, the lingering echoes of grief softened, replaced by a gentle serenity born of reunion and understanding. Orpheus wandered through the quiet halls of the afterlife, guided not by fear but by the faint resonance of memory, the subtle pull of devotion, and the tender hope that had never fully left his heart. There was a calm here, a quiet rhythm to existence that differed from the restless urgency of the mortal world. Shadows were no longer menacing. They became gentle reminders of life and love, places where memory lingered and could be cherished. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the faint, comforting echoes of his own music, resonating through eternity, carrying the story of his journey and the depth of his devotion. And then, as if drawn by the threads of love and memory, Eurydice appeared. She was no longer the fragile, uncertain presence of the mortal world, but luminous and serene, her form radiant in the gentle light of this eternal realm. Their eyes met, and in that single moment, the weight of all their trials seemed to lift. No longer constrained by the laws of life and death, Orpheus could feel her presence fully, and she could feel his. The separation that had defined his mortal existence dissolved into the quiet harmony of reunion, a harmony that neither shadow nor doubt could disrupt. In this afterlife, they could walk together freely, unburdened by conditions, tests, or limitations. Orpheus' heart, which had been so finely attuned to trust, patience, and love, finally found relief. There was no longer a need for restraint, no danger in turning a glance, no fear of losing what was most precious. Eurydice's hand rested gently in his, her warmth a comforting constant, a reminder that love endures beyond the reach of time and mortality. Every step they took together was a celebration of devotion, a quiet affirmation of the enduring power of their bond. Orpheus' music took on a new dimension. His lyre, once a mortal instrument, now seemed to sing with the resonance of eternity. Each note was imbued not only with memory and longing but with the gentle joy of reunion. The melodies carried through the afterlife, touching spirits, shaping light and shadow, and harmonizing with the eternal rhythm of existence. The grief that had defined so much of his life softened into something beautiful and enduring, a music that balanced sorrow and joy, absence and presence, loss and fulfillment. Eurydice and Orpheus wandered through landscapes that seemed shaped by memory itself, gentle meadows of light and shadow, rivers that reflected both the past and the eternal present, and forests where time moved softly, measured by the quiet rhythms of heartbeats and melody. They walked together, each step a testament to the journey they had shared and the love that had persisted through trials, loss, and the passage of life and death. In this space, all the pain of the mortal world was transformed into reflection, reverence, and serene beauty. The myth tells us that in this eternal reunion, Orpheus finally understood the profound lessons of his journey. Love requires patience, devotion, and courage. Yet it is also defined by acceptance, the recognition that some trials cannot be avoided, some loss cannot be prevented. In life, he had faced the underworld, the forces of gods, and the unpredictability of human frailty. Yet in the afterlife, he learned that love, when sustained by memory and devotion, can endure even beyond the harshest separations. This understanding brought a quiet peace that permeated his very being, allowing his music to flow unburdened and radiant. In this space, their reunion was not marked by grand gestures or words, but by the quiet presence of each other, the gentle touch of hands, and the unspoken understanding that their love had survived every obstacle. They could speak, laugh, and move together freely, yet words were often unnecessary. The music, the memory, and the essence of their shared experiences communicated everything that needed to be said. Here, there was no fear, no hesitation, no tragic interruptions, only the calm, enduring reality of being together, a love unbroken by mortality or fate. The afterlife became a realm where the story of Orpheus and Eurydice existed in perfect balance, a timeless reflection of devotion, resilience, and the quiet beauty that arises from enduring love. Their reunion illustrates that while mortal life may be fleeting and filled with sorrow, the heart's capacity for love and memory is eternal. Even when separated by death, the bonds forged through love remain, able to transcend the limitations of time, space, and even mortality itself. As Orpheus played his lyre in this eternal space, the music took on a new, radiant quality. Each note carried with it not only sorrow and memory but also fulfillment, serenity, and the gentle joy of reunion. The melodies wove through the afterlife, shaping the light and the shadow, blending grief and love into something that resonated with eternity. His music became a bridge, connecting all who listened, mortal or spirit, to the enduring power of devotion and the beauty of love that endures even beyond death. In this way, the story of Orpheus and Eurydice concludes not with tragedy, but with a gentle, eternal peace. Their spirits, reunited at last, exist in harmony, surrounded by the quiet, enduring beauty of memory, devotion, and music. The myth reminds us that love, patience, and trust hold power far beyond the mortal world, and that even the deepest sorrow can transform into something timeless, beautiful, and serene. The story of Orpheus and Eurydice holds within it lessons that extend far beyond the myth itself, echoing quietly through time and into the hearts of those who pause to listen. Their tale is not simply one of love, loss, and reunion, but also a reflection on the delicate balance between patience, trust, and devotion. It reminds us that true love is often tested by forces beyond our control, by fate, circumstance, and even the impulses of the human heart. And yet, it also teaches that the strength of devotion, the persistence of memory, and the care taken to honor what we hold most dear can create beauty that endures far beyond the fleeting moments of life. One of the most profound lessons is the importance of patience. Orpheus' journey to the underworld was long and treacherous, a path filled with uncertainty, danger, and challenges that would have deterred most mortals. Yet he moved forward, step by step, guided not by fear but by love. He did not rush, he did not falter in his purpose, and he followed the rules set before him with careful attention. This patience was not passive, but active, a deliberate choice to honor the journey, to trust in the process, and to respect the limits imposed by forces greater than himself. It is a reminder that patience in love and life is not merely waiting, but a mindful, intentional endurance that strengthens the heart. Trust is another quiet but powerful theme woven throughout the myth. Orpheus was instructed not to look back as he led Eurydice out of the underworld. That command was simple, yet it tested the most fundamental human impulses: doubt, fear, and longing. When he ultimately glanced, the consequence was profound: a moment of weakness, a momentary lapse in trust, and the separation that followed was tragic. This moment illustrates that trust, whether in others, in the natural order, or in the processes of life, is fragile yet essential. It is an understanding that actions have consequences, and that faith, even when difficult, is a cornerstone of enduring love and meaningful relationships. Devotion is perhaps the most enduring lesson of all. Orpheus' love for Eurydice did not diminish after her death. It did not fade with time or circumstance. He carried her memory, her essence, and the story of their shared life into every step, every note, and every song. His devotion shaped his life, guided his choices, and gave purpose to his art. Through grief, solitude, and even the tragedy of his own death, Orpheus remained steadfast. This teaches us that true devotion is not dependent on circumstance, nor is it diminished by distance or separation. It is a quiet, persistent presence, a guiding force that shapes not only the lover but also the world around them through expression, memory, and action. The myth also reflects the transformative power of grief. Orpheus' sorrow, though profound, was not destructive. Instead, it became the source of his music, the vehicle through which he communicated his deepest emotions and connected with the world. His grief was tempered by reflection, transmuted into artistry, and expressed in ways that brought solace to others. In this way, grief is not merely an obstacle, but a teacher, a force that can cultivate empathy, deepen understanding, and inspire creations that resonate far beyond the individual. It reminds us that the challenges of loss, though painful, can be a source of enduring strength and beauty. Love, patience, trust, and devotion intertwine throughout the story to create a tapestry of human experience that is both personal and universal. The myth gently conveys that love is not merely possession or fulfillment, but a combination of commitment, respect, and endurance through trials. Orpheus' journey is a testament to the lengths to which devotion can go, the sacrifices it can demand, and the quiet, enduring rewards it offers in return. Even when circumstances conspire against fulfillment, the act of loving fully leaves a lasting mark on both the heart and the world. Finally, the tale reminds us that the beauty of love often lies in its impermanence and in the care taken to honor it. Life is fleeting, experiences are temporary, and losses are inevitable. Yet when love is expressed with sincerity and devotion, it leaves traces that endure, in memory, in art, in stories told across generations. Orpheus' music, born from sorrow and devotion, carries these lessons forward, allowing each note to echo across time as a gentle reminder of the power of love, the necessity of patience, the importance of trust, and the quiet dignity of unwavering devotion. In reflecting on Orpheus and Eurydice, we can see how their story serves as a meditation on life itself. It teaches that even in moments of despair, there is value in perseverance. That even when loss touches us deeply, there's potential for creation, reflection, and connection. That the heart, though vulnerable, has an extraordinary capacity to love, endure, and inspire. And perhaps most importantly, it reassures us that while sorrow may shape the path, it does not define the entirety of the journey. Love, memory, and devotion leave enduring traces that continue to resonate long after the moment has passed. In this way, the myth becomes more than a story of ancient gods and mortals. It becomes a calming, contemplative reflection for those who listen, a gentle guide through the complexities of emotion and the rhythms of life. It encourages the quiet meditation that this storytelling channel seeks to provide, an invitation to rest, to reflect, and to allow the soft lessons of patience, trust, and devotion to settle gently in the mind and heart. Through Orpheus and Eurydice, we learn that love, in its truest form, is both fragile and eternal, a gentle force that endures, heals, and transforms, guiding us even in the quietest, most reflective moments of our lives.
The story of Orpheus and Eurydice has echoed through the centuries, leaving a legacy that extends far beyond the boundaries of its original myth. Orpheus, the mortal who ventured into the underworld, whose love and grief shaped melodies of enduring beauty, has become a symbol not only of devotion but also of the transformative power of art. His influence can be traced through countless generations, appearing in music, poetry, theater, and storytelling. The tale reminds us that stories of love, loss, and resilience are timeless, and that art born of emotion continues to resonate long after its creator has passed from the mortal world. In the realm of music, Orpheus' influence is particularly profound. Musicians throughout history have drawn inspiration from his lyre, imagining the power of notes that could calm storms, charm animals, and move even the hearts of gods. His story became a metaphor for the profound connection between emotion and sound. That music, when born from genuine feeling, can touch the soul in ways words alone cannot. Composers and poets have envisioned Orpheus as the archetypal musician, a figure whose melodies embody both the pain of loss and the serenity of devotion. In this way, Orpheus' life and story continue to inspire those who create, reminding artists that the most powerful works often emerge from the depths of the human heart. Beyond music, Orpheus' myth has influenced literature and storytelling across cultures. Poets and writers have retold his tale, emphasizing different aspects: his courage, his grief, his devotion, and his tragic end. In some versions, the focus is on the heroism of his journey to the underworld. In others, it is the enduring love that defines his existence. Each retelling preserves the essential truths of the story while offering subtle variations, reflecting the adaptability of myth to convey universal themes. This continued reinterpretation ensures that Orpheus' lessons, patience, trust, devotion, and the transformative power of grief remain alive, touching hearts and minds across generations. Orpheus' influence is also seen in theater and performance. Ancient dramas, inspired by his journey, have portrayed the emotional intensity of his love and loss, the suspense of the underworld, and the quiet tragedy of his mortality. Actors embodying Orpheus bring to life the delicate balance between hope and despair, control and impulse, life and death. Through performance, audiences experience the depth of his devotion, the weight of his sorrow, and the serenity found in memory and music. These dramatic interpretations, often subtle and reflective, allow the myth to serve as both entertainment and meditation, offering a space to contemplate emotion and human experience. The enduring legacy of Orpheus also extends into the realm of culture and symbolism. He is often depicted as the ultimate lover, the musician whose art transcends ordinary limits, and the hero whose journey teaches the value of devotion and patience. His story has been used as a reference in philosophy, art, and education, illustrating the timeless intersection of human emotion, moral reflection, and creative expression. Orpheus demonstrates that even the most tragic experiences can leave lasting beauty and wisdom, that love and grief can coexist in harmony, and that the echoes of one life can influence countless others across time and space. In addition, Orpheus' myth has provided inspiration for reflection and meditation. For those seeking solace, his story is a gentle guide through the complexities of love, loss, and resilience. The journey to the underworld and the reunion in spirit with Eurydice offer both caution and comfort. Caution in the fragility of trust, comfort in the endurance of devotion. Listening to or imagining the melodies of Orpheus' lyre can be a form of quiet contemplation, inviting introspection and emotional processing. In this way, the myth serves not only as entertainment or historical lore but also as a source of personal insight and emotional calm. Even today, artists, musicians, and writers continue to honor Orpheus through new works, demonstrating the myth's timeless relevance. Symphonies, operas, and chamber pieces often explore the themes of his journey, evoking the underworld, the tender tension of the moment when he turns, and the serene beauty of his ultimate reunion with Eurydice. Visual artists depict the delicate, haunting imagery of the myth, Orpheus walking through shadowed landscapes, the soft glow of Eurydice's presence, and the luminous threads of memory and love that bind them. Each interpretation adds a layer to the ever-growing legacy, reinforcing the universality of the story and the profound resonance of Orpheus' music, courage, and devotion. Orpheus' legacy also teaches us about the transformative potential of storytelling itself. By listening, remembering, and retelling, audiences participate in the preservation of human emotion and wisdom. His tale becomes a shared experience, a quiet thread that connects past and present, the mortal and the spiritual, sorrow and serenity. It reminds us that stories, like music, can transcend the limitations of time and mortality, shaping culture and consciousness long after the lives that inspired them have ended. In this way, Orpheus' myth becomes more than a story. It becomes a living presence in the collective imagination. His music, his devotion, and his journey continue to resonate, offering both guidance and comfort to those who engage with it. It is a testament to the enduring power of art, love, and memory, and a reminder that even the deepest sorrow can give rise to something timeless, beautiful, and calming. For anyone who listens, the story of Orpheus and Eurydice remains a gentle, enduring whisper across the ages, a melody of love, loss, and devotion that never truly ends. As we reach the close of Orpheus and Eurydice's story, it is gentle to pause and let the echoes of their journey settle quietly in the mind. This is a story not merely of ancient myth, but of the enduring human experiences of love, loss, and the quiet persistence of devotion. Through Orpheus' courage, patience, and music, and through Eurydice's presence both in life and spirit, we are reminded of the fragile yet enduring beauty of the human heart. The lessons of this myth are not loud or forceful. They are subtle, like a soft melody played on a quiet evening, inviting reflection, comfort, and serenity. In considering Orpheus' life and journey, we see that love is far more than fleeting moments or simple passion. True devotion requires patience, trust, and the willingness to endure the hardships that accompany attachment and care. Orpheus' descent into the underworld, his delicate handling of Eurydice's fragile presence, and his eventual return, though incomplete in the mortal world, illustrate the delicate balance between hope and caution. Love, the story teaches, is not only an emotion but a disciplined practice, one that asks us to nurture, to respect, and to honor even in the face of uncertainty and challenge. Equally important is the lesson of grief and transformation. Orpheus' sorrow, while profound, never consumed him entirely. Instead, it became the source of his art, the guiding force of his music, and the channel through which he communicated with the world and with the memory of Eurydice. Grief, when approached with reflection and honesty, has the potential to shape beauty, deepen understanding, and connect us more intimately to the universe around us. It teaches us that pain and love are not opposites but companions, intertwined forces that, together, reveal the depth and complexity of human existence. As we linger on the melodies Orpheus played, we can imagine them continuing softly in the spaces of our imagination. Each note a gentle reminder that even when life feels incomplete or loss feels overwhelming, beauty remains possible. Music, memory, and devotion persist, quietly threading their way through the fabric of existence. And in these threads, the myth finds its ultimate purpose: to offer comfort, to invite reflection, and to guide the listener into a calm state of acceptance and understanding. The story becomes a lullaby, not of finality, but of gentle continuity, a reassurance that the heart's capacity for love and remembrance remains undiminished. In their afterlife reunion, Orpheus and Eurydice embody the enduring power of love and memory. There, free from mortal constraints, they are whole again, walking together in quiet harmony. Their story, however tragic in parts, concludes with a serenity that carries through to those who listen. It teaches that even when physical separation occurs, the bonds forged through devotion and care can transcend mortality, becoming eternal in spirit. In this way, the myth invites the mind to rest, to imagine a space where love is constant, untroubled, and luminous, a comforting vision as the world grows quiet around us. The gentle resonance of Orpheus' legacy extends far beyond the story itself. His life and music continue to influence art, literature, and music, reminding us of the enduring power of creativity born from emotion. By listening to his story, we are invited to consider how our own acts of devotion, memory, and expression can leave lasting impressions on the world. The myth encourages introspection, a soft awareness of the value of patience, trust, and the careful tending of relationships. And as these lessons settle into the mind, they carry with them a quiet reassurance, a feeling that even in sorrow there is meaning, and even in absence, there is enduring connection. As the evening deepens and the mind drifts, we can imagine Orpheus' lyre playing in the soft folds of memory, its notes mingling with the whispers of wind through trees and the gentle flow of rivers. These sounds become an invisible thread connecting past and present, myth and mind, sorrow and serenity. Each listener becomes part of this ongoing harmony, carried into calm reflection, comforted by the timeless story of love that transcends both death and distance. The narrative acts as a soft current, guiding thought gently toward peace, allowing imagination to rest, and encouraging the heart to reflect quietly on its own experiences of love and loss. Finally, the story closes with the quiet truth that the beauty of myth lies not only in its events, but in the emotions it evokes and the reflection it inspires. Orpheus and Eurydice teach us that the heart's experiences, joy, sorrow, patience, and devotion, can be profound guides for living. They remind us that even in moments of trial, there is room for expression, creation, and connection. And perhaps most importantly, they offer a comforting presence in the quiet moments, a gentle reassurance that love, memory, and beauty endure, even when the world is hushed and night settles in. As we let this story rest in the mind, it can serve as a gentle lullaby for reflection, guiding thoughts toward calm, encouraging imagination to wander softly, and inviting the heart to carry lessons of patience, trust, and devotion into the quiet spaces of our own lives. Orpheus and Eurydice remind us that, though loss is inevitable, love is eternal, and that the music of the heart, like the softest song, continues long after the last note has been played. In this quiet conclusion, we can close our eyes and imagine the soft glow of memory, the gentle strum of a lyre, and the calm presence of enduring love. The story, now resting in our thoughts, offers peace and reflection, leaving behind a timeless message that love, patience, and devotion, carried with sincerity, can transform sorrow into serenity, and even in the quietest moments, echo softly, endlessly, through time. As we bring this journey to its final moments, it is gentle to imagine Orpheus' story lingering quietly, like the last notes of a melody fading into the night. Though the mortal events of his life were filled with longing, loss, and tragedy, The legacy of his love and devotion continues, carried forward in memory, music, and myth. This final section is not so much an ending as it is a soft, reflective pause, an invitation to rest, to breathe, and to let the lessons of Orpheus and Eurydice settle gently into the mind and heart. Orpheus' story teaches us that the heart's experiences are both delicate and enduring. Each act of love, each moment of patience, and each thread of devotion leaves a mark, not only on the life of another, but on the world itself. The trials he faced, including the perilous descent into the underworld and the eventual tragedy at the hands of the Maenads, show the fragility of mortal existence, yet also highlight the strength that comes from devotion and sincerity. Even in death, Orpheus' music continued to resonate, reminding us that what is born of genuine feeling can transcend time and circumstance. In this quiet reflection, we can also see how grief and longing can transform into something profound and lasting. Orpheus' sorrow, though immense, never destroyed him. Instead, it became a source of creation, reflection, and connection. His music, filled with the echoes of love and memory, demonstrates that even in our most vulnerable moments, the heart has the capacity to produce beauty and meaning. In this way, grief is not only a force of pain but also a teacher, guiding us toward deeper understanding, empathy, and the quiet expression of our most profound emotions. The reunion of Orpheus and Eurydice in the afterlife offers a gentle sense of closure, a quiet reward for the devotion and courage displayed in life. There, freed from mortal constraints, their love could exist in serenity and harmony. The myth invites us to imagine the warmth of that reunion, the tender presence of a beloved, and the calm assurance that love, once forged, endures beyond the limitations of time and space. Even if such reunions are not literal in our own lives, the story encourages a reflection on the enduring impact of care, commitment, and memory, the unseen threads that connect us across moments and distances. As we carry this story in our minds, it is also a meditation on the power of storytelling itself. Orpheus' journey, his music, and his devotion have survived for centuries because they speak to universal human experiences. Love, loss, patience, trust, and devotion are threads that every heart can recognize. Through myth, these experiences are preserved, inviting reflection and calm contemplation. In this way, the story becomes more than entertainment. It becomes a gentle guide, a lullaby for thought, and a reminder that our deepest emotions have both meaning and resonance beyond the immediate moment. Finally, the quiet reflection on Orpheus and Eurydice reminds us of the beauty inherent in devotion and artistry. Orpheus' music, born of love and sorrow, exemplifies the enduring power of expression, showing that art and emotion are inseparable. Each note, each story retold, and each act of remembrance carries forward the lessons of his life. That patience, trust, and love are transformative, that grief can become creation, and that even in the face of mortality, what is heartfelt continues to influence and inspire. As we conclude this journey, it is comforting to imagine Orpheus lies softly resonating in the quiet spaces of imagination, that the echoes of his love and courage linger like a gentle breeze. The story leaves us with a sense of calm reflection, encouraging the mind to rest and the heart to carry forward the lessons of devotion, patience, and enduring love. Even in the final moments, we are reminded that love, memory, and art persist, echoing softly through time, as quiet and eternal as the night itself. And so, as the last thoughts of Orpheus and Eurydice fade into stillness, we are invited to rest with them in spirit. Their story, now fully woven into memory, offers not only reflection but a gentle sense of peace. In the soft, quiet spaces of the mind, their love endures, their music continues, and the lessons of patience, devotion, and enduring beauty settle gently like a soft lullaby, carrying us toward rest, reflection, and serenity.